famous rocker is part of an investigation by a task force that looks into internet crimes against children. Authorities searched Gene Simmons' house in Benedict Canyon.
As you noticed, I'm stunning in real life, and that's when you want it while you're on top. Get out of the ring.
Susie, and also right now, a lot of details remain unclear, including exactly who this investigation may involve and their connection to Gene Simmons' family.
Gene Simmons, known as much for his business mogul antics as his onstage antics, is now at the center of rumors so wild, even his most die-hard fans are left speechless.
And perhaps the times where I've been disappointed in Gene were times where I really should have said that's not on his list.
Is this just another publicity stunt, or is something far bigger and far more scandalous brewing behind the scenes?
Does he do things that I question? Does he say things that I don't want to align myself with?
The details are murky, the sources are buzzing, and one thing's for sure. What's coming next could rewrite the story of Gene Simmons forever. So let's get into it. The latest news about Gene Simmons is blowing up the headlines, and it's not the kind of story Kiss fans ever thought they'd hear. For years, he was the fire-breathing frontman who turned chaos into cash and shock value into superstardom. But this time, the spotlight's burning a little too hot for comfort.
Gene Simmons, the rock star, has been entertaining fans for years. Loyal fans who have followed Kiss for decades. They are known as the Kiss Army.
But behind the makeup and the rock god swagger, new revelations are shaking up everything fans thought they knew. From his family and fortune to the empire he built on shock and showmanship. Now, the cracks are showing, and the question is, are we witnessing a downfall, a comeback, or something way messier in between? One thing's clear, this time, the headlines are louder than the guitars, and the truth's only getting darker. Before Gene Simmons became the fire-breathing icon of Kiss, the man who turned blood and flames into a global brand, he was Chaim Witz, a kid from Haifa, Israel, raised by a single mother who'd survived one of humanity's darkest nightmares.
I was born in Israel. I didn't know anything about history or life or anything. It's just that I knew that my mother was there. Our father, my father, I didn't want it personal.
His beginnings were anything but glamorous. They were carved out of scarcity, loss, and a burning refusal to ever feel powerless again. That hunger became the fuel behind the fire-breathing persona he later built, not just for fame, but for armor. Simmons entered the world in the long shadow of the Holocaust. His mother, Flora Klein, survived the Nazi concentration camps in Hungary, losing nearly everyone she loved before escaping to rebuild her life in Israel. She rarely spoke about it, but her silence carried weight, a kind of quiet, watchful fear that shaped everything around her.
My mother was a concentration camp survivor when she was in the camps when she was 14 years of age.
Chaim grew up not just learning about survival, he lived it. His parents split in the mid-1950s, his father staying in Israel while Flora worked brutal hours in factories just to keep food on the table. Sometimes, dinner was nothing more than bread and milk. The man who'd one day command sold-out arenas was once a skinny kid sewing his own coat from an old army blanket, a far cry from the leather and spikes of the demon. But hardship breeds hunger. Chaim found escape in American comic books. Spider-Man, Superman, larger-than-life heroes who always rose above their pain. Even before he could read English, he studied the panels, teaching himself word by word. Because deep down, he didn't just want to understand his heroes, he wanted to become one.
I was born 6 months after the formation of Israel. And, when I was growing up, I had a stick and a rock. There were no roads. It was just dirt.
By 7, he was already speaking Hebrew, Hungarian, Turkish, and slowly piecing together English. But for young Chaim, it wasn't just about learning words. It was about learning reinvention. If superheroes could hide their pain behind masks and capes, maybe he could too. Then came 1958, the year that changed everything. Flora made a bold, terrifying decision to leave Israel behind and start over in Queens, New York. No money, no clear plan, just survival instincts and a one-way ticket to the unknown. The culture shock hit hard. Toilets that flushed and TV dinners blew his mind. But the American schoolyard was brutal. His accent, his clothes, everything about him made him a target. So he did what he always did, turned pain into purpose. He sold cactus plants door to door, picked fruit, and soaked up English from TV and comic books. Every insult, every rejection just sharpened his focus. By his early teens, Chaim was already reinventing himself, name and all. He legally became Gene Klein, borrowing Gene from cowboy legend Gene Autry, before evolving once more into Gene Simmons, a name that sounded built for fame. He practiced guitar until his fingers bled, jumped between garage bands, and studied pop culture like it was religion.
No matter how cool you get, no matter how rich or how thing, you never forget those childhood experiences.
Then came 1964, the spark that lit the fuse. The Beatles hit the Ed Sullivan Show, and Gene didn't just see a performance, he saw power. It wasn't the kind of fame he wanted to admire. It was the kind he wanted to own. Those odd jobs, from cleaning butcher shops to slicing meat at delis, and even teaching in Spanish Harlem, were all just stepping stones for Gene Simmons. Every paycheck was fuel for his bigger plan, and every long shift was a reminder that he was meant for more. While others partied or drifted off course, Simmons stayed locked in. No distractions. His discipline became his edge, always poised, always calculating.
This is how nutty the world has become. Bass player in a rock band, which happens to be America's #1 rock band of all time in all categories, is finally going to tell you how you can make some more money and attain power.
So when he teamed up with Paul Stanley to sketch out what would become Kiss, all that control and strategy finally had a stage. Simmons wasn't aiming to be just another rock star. He wanted to be a myth. He built the Demon, a persona that mixed horror, comic book villains, and the ghosts of his own past. The blood, the flames, the armor. It wasn't just showbiz. It was survival reimagined, a way to say, I'll never be powerless again. And that armor? It didn't just protect him, it made him a mogul. When Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley officially formed Kiss in the early 70s, they weren't chasing radio hits. They were designing a machine, a spectacle that could grab you before a single note hit your ears. Simmons, the ever-sharp strategist, understood early on, music was only half the equation. The other half was branding.
You know that's not going to happen. Ace has been in and out of the band 3 different times. That's enough.
With Ace Frehley as the spaceman, Peter Criss as the Catman, Paul Stanley as the Star Child, and Simmons as the Demon, Kiss became a living comic book. 4 faces you couldn't forget. And that was the point. While other rock bands fought for airplay, Simmons was building an empire. He saw potential in lunchboxes, dolls, trading cards, anything that could carry that KISS logo. By 1975, before the band even had a major radio hit, Kiss had already become a marketing juggernaut. Fans didn't just listen to Kiss, they bought into it. It wasn't just rock and roll anymore. It was a brand, a business, and a billion-dollar identity, all masterminded by the boy who once made his own coat from an army blanket.
Well, you know, they're not always the same thing. There are some very famous people who have lots of power. Some famous people have lots of money, and there are some unknown people who have a lot of money but don't have the power. They're not always the same thing.
Parents who hated the band's music still ended up shelling out cash for Kiss toys, lunchboxes, and Halloween masks because their kids demanded them. Within just a few years, Kiss merchandise wasn't just selling, it was dominating, sometimes even outselling their actual records. The real turning point came in 1975 with the release of Alive, a live album that finally captured the chaos, fire, and adrenaline of their shows. It went multi-platinum and turned Kiss from a cult curiosity into a full-blown cultural phenomenon. Suddenly, they weren't just playing arenas. They were owning them, backed by a rabid fan base proudly calling themselves the Kiss Army. And Gene Simmons? He saw dollar signs everywhere. Loyalty wasn't just admiration, it was currency.
As you walk down the street, business to business, you get to be on Fox, Wall Street's down there, Fashion Avenue's over there, so there's a lot of hubbub and bub in New York City. A lot of opportunity here.
By the end of the 70s, Kiss had more than 100 licensed products. Everything from pinball machines to board games, Halloween costumes, and later, even Kiss-branded coffins. The rule was simple. If 10 people would buy it, Kiss would slap their logo on it. Critics called it shameless, but Simmons called it smart business. Why stop at records, he'd say, when you can sell the lifestyle? Of course, that money-making machine came at a cost. By the late 70s, the music itself was starting to take a backseat to the marketing. Fans and critics alike began to wonder, had Kiss become more brand than band? The 1978 TV movie Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park didn't help. With its cringeworthy acting and cartoonish plot, it became an easy target for ridicule. But for Simmons, it was a test run, proof that Kiss could conquer any medium. And he was right.
Does Kiss exist anymore?
Does what exist?
Kiss. Kiss?
You did a farewell tour at Madison Square.
It's a very good question.
By the early 2000s, Kiss had trademarked its logo on more than 5,000 products, from to credit cards, crossing well over $1 billion in merchandise revenue. When people called him a sellout, Simmons didn't flinch. His famous response, "Being called a sellout means somebody's buying." That ruthless approach turned Kiss into something no other rock band had pulled off before, a franchise. Simmons modeled the empire on his childhood inspirations, comic books, superheroes, and pop culture icons who lived forever through merchandise. He didn't just want Kiss to make music, he wanted it to become immortal.
I still can't write music. I can't read or write music, but I've
Were you
written
composing
hundreds,
music?
I've come up with hundreds and hundreds of songs,
Yes.
Many of which are going to be on GeneSimmonsVault.com, the largest box set of all time.
He brought that same mindset, part genius, part madness, into his approach to rock and roll. Every tour wasn't just a concert, it was a traveling circus of capitalism. New city, new merch drop, new payday. Ruthless? Absolutely. But effective? Without question. Decades later, while most of their 70s peers faded into nostalgia tours, Kiss was still cashing checks in the 2000s, packing arenas, licensing deals, and farewell tours that never quite said farewell. Their staying power wasn't just built on music, it was built on Simmons' relentless refusal to let the brand die. He didn't just form a band, he engineered an economy.
But I am remiss in my inferred fiduciary duty if I don't continue my tirade before I get too tirade.
But behind the blood-spitting businessman was a man still trying to reconcile the empire he built with the life he kept off stage, a life that would eventually be dragged right into the spotlight. For decades, Gene Simmons played the role of the untouchable rock god, the demon who breathed fire, spat blood, and bragged about his countless conquests. Marriage? Family life? That wasn't part of his legend. And yet, the man who swore he'd never settle down ended up doing the one thing no one saw coming, letting cameras into his home. It all started with Shannon Tweed. The two met in 1983 at the Playboy Mansion, the perfect place for a man like Gene to cross paths with a woman who could actually match him. Shannon, a former Playboy Playmate of the Year and rising actress, knew exactly how the Hollywood machine worked. But what surprised everyone was that she stayed.
Did you have a weakness for women?
Oh yeah, I'm the male of the species, and you know, I went from famine to feast.
Gene made it clear from day one, no marriage, no contracts, no promises. He blamed his parents' divorce, his fear of attachment, his belief that love was temporary. Shannon, meanwhile, played the long game. And it was a long one. Nearly 3 decades of public temptation, private battles, and quiet endurance. By the late 80s and 90s, they had built a family together. Their son Nick arrived in 1989, followed by daughter Sophie in 1992. Gene may have refused the ring, but he embraced fatherhood in his own Gene Simmons way.
It's an interesting either prognosis or thought, and maybe I'm not the one to determine that.
He remained proudly sober, never touching or alcohol, often calling it his secret weapon in a world where most rock stars self-destructed. For all his notorious womanizing, he insisted his children came first, a contradiction that fans found fascinating and critics found hard to believe. But those contradictions that Gene had managed to keep behind the makeup finally caught up with him when Gene Simmons' Family Jewels premiered on A&E in 2006. For the first time, fans and critics saw the demon stripped bare. No pyrotechnics, no stage blood, just Gene, Shannon, and their kids living out a not-so-perfect version of the American dream.
I was guilty as charged of going after the pleasures of the flesh, absolutely.
The show painted 2 very different pictures. On one side, you saw the doting dad juggling arena tours with PTA meetings and pitching million-dollar deals between family dinners. It made him relatable, even lovable to audiences who'd never cared for Kiss. But on the other side, it exposed the cracks, the dysfunction and emotional distance that his stage persona had long helped him hide. Running for 7 seasons and 160 episodes, Family Jewels was an undeniable hit. Viewers couldn't look away from the chaos. Gene dodging Shannon's questions about marriage, dishing out dad wisdom to Nick and Sophie, and constantly struggling to balance the man he was on stage with the man he was at home.
Loving mother, caring, she's wonderful. I treasure the time we had together, and she's still a friend. I didn't understand Hollywood. I didn't understand anything about Los Angeles.
But as the cameras rolled, the cracks widened. Shannon's patience, after nearly 30 years, finally reached its breaking point. The tension exploded on camera. The smiles gave way to shouting. The jokes turned into jabs. Then came 2011, the year everything boiled over. During one infamous talk show taping, Shannon stormed off set, publicly calling Gene a pig. But the real bombshell came later, in what would become one of the most jaw-dropping moments of reality TV. Shannon finding Gene's secret stash of thousands of Polaroids, each one capturing his escapades with other women over the years. Her response? She burned them, right there on camera. Flames devoured decades of temptation, betrayal, and ego. A literal and symbolic purge of the man Gene had been before her patience ran out.
Is that the reason you said later in life that, quote, fame creates monsters? Were you one?
Perhaps.
In that moment, the demon wasn't breathing fire. He was standing in it. And then, in a twist nobody saw coming, Gene Simmons did the unthinkable. After 28 years of deflection, denial, and commitment phobia, the self-proclaimed eternal bachelor finally caved. In July 2011, Gene dropped to one knee and proposed to Shannon Tweed, the same woman who had spent decades waiting for him to grow up. By October, the two were standing at the altar, flanked by their kids, Nick as best man and Sophie as maid of honor. What could have been a private moment of redemption turned into a full-blown public event, broadcast for millions to witness. To some critics, it was a publicity stunt, the perfect ratings grab for the Family Jewels finale. But to many fans, it was something else entirely, a rare glimpse of genuine vulnerability from a man who had built his entire existence on armor and ego. For once, the demon blinked.
Kids feeling what I felt, the world ended. I felt like, I felt guilty. What did I do wrong that made my father get up and leave without explaining anything?
Gene later admitted that his lifelong fear of marriage wasn't rebellion, it was trauma. The scars of his fractured childhood, his mother's pain, and decades of emotional evasion all caught up with him, and reality TV, of all things, became the stage for his redemption arc. Through Family Jewels, Gene Simmons was rebranded, not by PR handlers, but by exposure. Viewers saw him not as the blood-spitting monster, but as a man fumbling through love, parenthood, and late-in-life humility. For Shannon, Nick, and Sophie, it was cathartic. For Gene, it was out of control.
See, this is the part where no one likes me anymore because my mom talks about my steamy loads on TV.
When the cameras finally shut off in 2012, Family Jewels left behind something bigger than ratings. It humanized a man who'd spent his life playing larger than life. It revealed Gene Simmons not as a monster, but as someone perpetually caught between myth and manhood. But if anyone thought marriage and mellowing out would tame the demon, they didn't know Gene, because even with the softer side revealed, controversy was always waiting in the wings, ready to remind the world that fame doesn't forget its fangs. For most of his career, Gene Simmons thrived on controversy. He played the villain on purpose, the arrogant rock god, the shameless capitalist, the unapologetic womanizer. In the 1970s, that persona sold records. Every scandal only made Kiss louder, richer, and more legendary.
By the way, yes, I do own this logo. I've owned this for 25 years.
Is that true?
That is true.
The money bag?
Yes, I do.
But by the 2000s, the cultural tide had shifted. What once looked like rebellious bravado was now being viewed through a far less forgiving lens. The same antics that once made him infamous were now threatening to implode the empire he'd built. The first major hit came in 2010, when ESPN makeup artist Victoria Jackson accused Simmons of inappropriate behavior during a Sports Center taping. She claimed he hugged and pressed against her while in costume. Simmons, true to form, mocked the accusation, even filing a countersuit claiming that his metal codpiece made such contact physically impossible.
Well, I mean, it had to come to that. I refuse to take back my words. I stand by every word I said.
The case was quietly settled out of court, but the damage was done. The old tricks that once made him a provocateur now made him look like a liability. For the first time, Gene's fire-breathing bravado was starting to backfire. In the years that followed, the controversies kept piling up. In 2016, a dishwasher at one of his Rock and Brews restaurants accused Simmons of groping her. Another similar allegation surfaced in 2017. Both cases were quietly settled, but they hinted at a pattern that Gene had long dismissed as misunderstandings. He claimed people misread his humor or twisted his blunt personality into something sinister. Still, even when no fire was proven, the smoke lingered, reputational damage that never fully went away.
And remember, there were two separate allegations. One resulted in settlement, the second one resulted in a trial.
PR disasters weren't limited to the courtroom. Simmons' unfiltered mouth frequently landed him in hot water. In 2017, he attempted to trademark the iconic devil horns hand gesture, insisting he'd invented it in 1974. The move enraged the metal community, who quickly reminded him that legends like John Lennon and Ronnie James Dio had used it decades earlier. He withdrew the filing within days, but the backlash painted him as greedy, tone-deaf, and willing to monetize even a cultural symbol.
She would see someone and go, "What's that?" And eventually learned that it was called the Maloik. And the Maloik was, someone was giving us the evil eye, so she's giving it protection against the evil eye.
Later that same year, Fox News officially banned Simmons after a series of jaw-dropping antics, barging into meetings, pulling down his pants to show his scars, and making crude jokes about Michael Jackson while promoting a new Kiss project. Within hours, the network declared him lifetime banned, a rare instance where his stunts overshadowed the empire he had built. Even without lawsuits, Gene managed to dominate headlines, often for the wrong reasons. In 2024, while appearing on Dancing with the Stars, he made comments about female dancers that viewers found creepy, joking that one contestant had fogged up my glasses. Social media immediately dubbed him the gross uncle of rock. Simmons didn't apologize. In true form, he doubled down in interviews, standing by his words. What once might have been seen as blunt honesty now reads as stubborn defiance. Lawsuits, PR blunders, and off-the-cuff remarks created a pattern. Gene Simmons was a man who could build an empire, but never escape the chaos his persona invited. For Gene Simmons, confrontation has always been the default. Contrition, almost never. He's long claimed he's just saying what others won't, but even the most diehard fans eventually start asking, is that persona still an asset in today's world?
How can you make more money just looking at myself and I can't stop touching me?
Why is that?
Well, that's because I won't sue me.
Simmons has shown remarkable resilience. Every scandal, every headline, every PR nightmare has left dents, but not destruction. Kiss merchandise still flies off the shelves, solo shows still sell out arenas, and reality TV appearances keep him in the spotlight. Yet the shadow of controversy serves as a stark reminder, fame isn't just a spotlight, it can burn. The arrogance that once made him untouchable has also been his greatest flaw, millions. Sure, immortality, debatable. As headlines turned hostile, even Simmons had to confront the uncomfortable truth. Even the demon can bleed. In recent years, missteps and public scrutiny have only deepened, sparking debates over whether his legend is still fully under his control or slowly spiraling out of it. Even after 5 decades in the spotlight, Gene Simmons shows no signs of slowing down or dodging controversy. The years 2024 and 2025 have been especially volatile, raising questions about ego, judgment, and whether the man behind the demon still knows when to step back.
Does he behave in certain ways? Yeah, but that's not here or there. The core of what we have is a work ethic and a bond that's built on time.
The first major flashpoint came in October 2024 on Dancing with the Stars. What fans expected as playful, cheeky banter quickly turned uncomfortable when Simmons made personal comments about female contestants, joking that one had fogged up his glasses. Social media erupted, crowning him the creepy uncle of rock. Decades ago, such remarks might have been shrugged off as blunt humor. Now, they land differently. True to form, Simmons didn't apologize. Instead, he doubled down, insisting he stood by every word. A man who built his empire on shock and apparently isn't ready to stop. Supporters cheered his signature bluntness. Critics, meanwhile, saw him as increasingly out of touch. If October 2024 tested his words, April 2025 tested his business instincts.
Don't quit your day job. Start a home business. Create an LLC, a limited liability corporation.
That's when Simmons unveiled the ultimate Gene Simmons experience, a $12,495 fan package offered before tickets went on sale. For the steep price, buyers could roadie for a day, assist with sound checks, eat backstage, receive a signed bass, and even be introduced on stage. Critics called it shameless profiteering, especially in tough economic times, with blogs labeling it the most tone-deaf package in rock. Fans predictably were split. Exploitation or genius rock capitalism? The packages sold out anyway, with some attendees calling the experience priceless. The rift between devotion and outrage only widened.
Your kids around or your next door neighbor and start a company, take over one of the rooms in your home, put up your computer, and the internet and social media is the extension of your arms and legs, and so marketing and sales is zero. It doesn't cost you anything.
Then came perhaps the most polarizing moment of all, Simmons and Kiss receiving Kennedy Center honors from President Donald Trump in August 2025. The news stunned fans, particularly those who remembered Simmons' sharp critique after January 6th, when he likened Trump's rise to cockroaches crawling from walls. To some, the award felt hypocritical. Social media erupted with memes contrasting past criticisms with the gleaming photo op. Simmons said nothing, letting silence speak, though, of course, silence in 2025 rarely quiets speculation. Many concluded his business instincts now outweighed his convictions.
And you can do anything, including getting bottled water, rebranding it, called diet water. You know, be creative, come up with something you think people will buy.
A hole in the marketplace.
The year also exposed cracks in his solo career. Several shows in March 2025 were canceled due to underwhelming ticket sales. Premium seats topping $500 seemed to push fans past the limit. For some critics, the cancellations marked a symbolic turning point. Had Simmons' reputation for monetizing every angle finally outlived fan loyalty? He shrugged off the criticism, claiming old-fashioned shows were easier without a full Kiss production. Confidence? Arrogance? Either way, it fueled the debate further, proving one thing: Gene Simmons still knows how to make headlines, even when the headlines bite back. Yet not every moment in Gene Simmons' life is about spectacle and controversy. In July 2025, during an interview on CBS Mornings following the death of Ozzy Osbourne, Simmons unexpectedly broke down in tears. He recalled Kiss opening for Black Sabbath in the 1970s, calling Ozzy a genuine egoless soul. For a man famous for fire-breathing bravado and unapologetic ego, the tears stunned fans. It was a fleeting glimpse of vulnerability, a side of Gene that years of scandals, lawsuits, and PR disasters could not fully erase. Taken together, the flashpoints of 2024 and 2025 reveal a stark contradiction in Simmons. Loved and hated, revered and resented, he has thrived for decades feeding on spectacle. Yet recently, the drama has often spilled off stage, leaving observers wondering, is he really in control, or has controversy begun to control him? That question looms not just over Simmons himself, but over those destined to inherit the KISS empire.
Because in a corporate environment, you're not going to get ahead. Say it all you want privately and all that stuff, unless of course you're a hip-hop mogul.
For Gene Simmons, life has always been bigger than music. It's been about building an empire, but what happens when the demon finally steps off stage for good? The story of his children, his hits, and the enduring Kiss brand reveals a legacy that is as much a burden as it is a triumph. His son Nick, born in 1989, sought to carve out his own identity as a comic book creator. In 2010, he released Incarnate, intended to launch his career, but it quickly became mired in controversy. Panels from the comic were accused of plagiarizing the Japanese manga Bleach. The backlash was swift. The publisher pulled the book, and though Nick defended his work as an homage, the scandal stuck.
We heard someone came forward and he just told us it was a straight up lie, so he's my dad, I believe him.
Gene defended his son publicly, but the episode underscored a critical truth. The Simmons name carries immense privilege and immense pressure. Legacy, it seems, is never just about fame. It's about navigating the shadows that come with it. Sophie, born in 1992, took a very different path from her brother. Rather than resist the Simmons legacy, she leaned into it while crafting her own identity. She pursued singing and television, appearing on X Factor, before building a career in body positivity modeling and advocacy. Unlike her father, Sophie embraced vulnerability, speaking openly about insecurities and using honesty as a counterbalance to Gene's larger-than-life bravado. In interviews, she often described herself as my father's daughter, but not his reflection, a clear reminder that living in the shadow of Kiss meant navigating it, not escaping it.
Did you ever establish a relationship with him or no? Never?
Sure, you know.
Once you got famous?
On that level.
Then there's Shannon Tweed, Gene's wife since 2011. Though not an heir in the traditional sense, she has long been the stabilizing force behind the chaos. Her fiery presence on Gene Simmons' family jewels helped reshape the public image image of the rock star, turning him from untouchable egotist into a relatable family man, even as old scandals resurfaced. Fans credit her with humanizing Gene, giving the Simmons empire a personal foundation, not just a financial one. If anyone or anything can truly be called Gene Simmons' heir, it might just be the Kiss brand itself. From the very beginning, Kiss has been far more than a band. It's a cultural business model, an imprint spanning everything from lunchboxes to coffins. Over 5,000 licensed products carry the iconic logo, and the band has sold more than 100 million albums worldwide. Merchandise alone has raked in over $1 billion, a testament to Simmons' vision. Perhaps his proudest boast, apart from all those platinum records, is his signature line, proof that ideas live longer than music.
Plug it in, and then you can deduct the square footage of that room from your taxes.
I've always heard that was a red flag for the IRS.
Sure, let them come in and audit somebody who's making 25, 30 grand.
But that empire casts a long shadow. For Nick and Sophie, the challenge has never been just carving out careers. It's been escaping the inevitable comparisons to a father who became a living icon. For Gene, the brand is both a blessing and a curse. He can never fully shed the demon, even in his rare, vulnerable moments. Every tour, product launch, and business stunt reinforces the same duality. Gene Simmons, the man, versus Gene Simmons, the mask.
Who do people think you are?
I would say there are some who think I'm an asshole. There are other people who think you only do this for money, and my response is, of course.
That duality feels sharper in 2025 than ever. Solo tours stumble at the ticket booth, premium packages ignite heated debate, and offhand remarks set social media ablaze. Yet the Kiss logo endures, tattooed on fans' skin, emblazoned on shirts, and embedded deep in the pop culture lexicon. Final tours have been hinted at before, but the machine never really stops. The heirs will inherit wealth and fame, yes, but they will also inherit the expectations, the scrutiny, and the lingering glances. For Simmons, this is not abstract. It's real, unavoidable, and relentless. For half a century, Gene Simmons built a life on spectacle, fire-breathing shows, blood-spitting theatrics, and a stage presence designed to outlast time itself. But when the lights dim and the amps fall silent, one question remains. What's left when the fireworks fade? Gene's story is a study in contradictions. He cast himself as the sober businessman of rock, even as others burned out, determined to forge an empire in a world of chaos. He turned shock into strategy, transforming a band into a billion-dollar brand. And yet, for all his control, scandals, lawsuits, and personal wounds have shaped a life that no merchandise could fully hide. His success is undeniable. Few artists have so completely reinvented the intersection of music and commerce the way Simmons did. Kiss didn't just sell albums, they sold an identity. Fans bought into a world, and Gene ensured that world reached everything from comics to coffins. His legacy, then, is clear. He is the man who redefined what it means to make it in rock and roll, a figure whose myth, music, and merciless drive will echo long after the stage lights go out.
I haven't had a bad day in my life, not since I came to the Promised Land. And let me tell you something, everybody points to Israel, and yes, I'm proud I'm being there, but the Promised Land is America.
But legacy cuts both ways. For every fan who sees Kiss as larger than life, critics point to Simmons as the embodiment of excess, more obsessed with money than music, more image than authenticity. The very branding that cemented his legendary status also made him a lightning rod. In today's culture, where every boast, misstep, and headline is preserved online, claims of thousands of women, lawsuits, and reality TV blunders raise hard questions. Will Gene Simmons be remembered as a visionary or a cautionary tale? Yet behind the mask lies the boy from Haifa who lost his father, watched his mother carry the scars of the Holocaust, and vowed never again to feel powerless. He became the demon, but he also became a husband and father. After decades of turmoil, Shannon Tweed has remained steadfast at his side. Their children, Nick and Sophie, have forged their own paths, sometimes stumbling, sometimes shining, as they navigate life in the long shadow of their father's fame. It is here in family that Gene's legacy finds its softest and most enduring notes, proof that even a fire-breathing rock god leaves traces of humanity behind. When the sparks finally die, what remains for Gene may be less about flames on stage and more about the fire he ignited in culture. From makeup and theatrics to a global brand, Kiss transformed not just live performance, but the very idea of what it means to leave a mark, and that mark may outlast even the demon himself. Those business instincts have redefined how bands think about branding. Gene Simmons' influence on entertainment is undeniable, even if it's deeply divisive. The true measure of his legacy may not lie in record sales, controversies, or headlines, but in what outlives him. Will Kiss endure like Disney or Marvel, a brand that transcends its creators? Or will it fade into mere nostalgia? Will Simmons be remembered as the man who conquered with fire and blood, or as someone who couldn't let go of the mask even as the world moved on? As of 2025, Simmons still tours, still courts headlines. The fireworks still ignite, but more often they reflect history rather than revolutionize it. The shock of yesterday is now part of rock lore, and within that history, Simmons exists not just as the demon, but as the man who proved that music could be more than sound. It could be a spectacle, a brand, a cultural imprint. Whether you love him or loathe him, one thing's crystal clear. Gene Simmons isn't just a rock star, he's a lightning rod for drama. And with these latest revelations, fans are left asking the same question over and over. What isn't he telling us? One thing's for sure, this story is far from over, and the next move could shock the world in ways no one saw coming. That's it for today. See you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.